She heard the glass break before she understood that she had thrown it. Simisola Adana stood frozen in the cold marble hall of the 40th floor, her chest heaving, staring at the whiskey bleeding across the black stone at her feet. 3 weeks she had kept her head down. 3 weeks she had swallowed every order, every silence, every cold look from the most dangerous man in the city. And now, in one reckless second, she had picked up his glass and thrown it against the wall of a house where people disappeared for far less. Footsteps. Slow. Unhurried. Coming down the hall toward her. She did not run. There was nowhere in this house that was not his. She only pressed her back against the cold console table and made herself breathe, because if she was about to be thrown out, or worse, she would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her tremble. Her sister had walked into this same house 18 months ago. Her sister had never walked out. And Simisola had not come all this way, had not lied her way through the door with a false reference and a stolen name, to break now over a single glass. The footsteps stopped. Jean Tejo looked at the broken glass. Then he looked at her. And for a long moment he said nothing at all, which was somehow worse than any shouting could have been. His eyes moved over her face the way a man reads a document he suspects has been forged. Slow. Thorough. Looking for the lie. You have a temper, he said finally. His voice was low and even, almost gentle, and that gentleness was the most frightening thing about him. The last person who broke something in my house did not do it twice. Simisola's pulse slammed in her throat. Her heart was doing something close to 140 beats a minute, she was almost certain of it, and she thought, absurdly, that if she died in this hallway it would at least be with an impressive resting heart rate. I'll pay for it, she said. She expected him to fire her. She braced for it. Instead Jean Tejo crouched, unhurried, and began picking up the shards of his own glass with his bare hands, one by one, into his palm. A man who owned half the shadows in this city, kneeling on his own marble to clean up after the maid who had defied him. She did not understand it. And in the part of her that she kept locked and silent, the part that had come here only for Nadia, something dangerous stirred, a warmth she had absolutely no permission to feel. Go to bed, Simisola, he said quietly, not looking up. Before I remember I'm supposed to be angry. She walked away without letting him see her exhale. Only when the service door closed behind her did her knees threaten to give. 3 weeks in this house and she still had no idea what game he was playing. Men like Jean Tejo did not clean up broken glass. They did not tell frightened women to go to bed. They made people disappear, quietly, completely, the way they had made her sister disappear, and then they carried on eating dinner alone at the far end of a table built for 20. Simisola pressed her palm flat against the photograph she kept hidden in her apron pocket. Nadia's face. Her reason. Her whole reason. 18 months ago Nadia O'Caro had taken a job as a personal assistant to a man whose name nobody would say out loud. She had called Simisola twice a week, breathless, excited, telling her the money was unreal and the boss was frightening but fair. Then the calls stopped. Then the number went dead. Then the police shrugged and called her a grown woman who had probably just moved on. Simisola had not shrugged. She had spent every cent she owned building a false history, a fake reference, a borrowed surname clean enough to pass a background check that men like this always ran. And she had walked in through the front door of the last place her sister was ever seen. She slid the photograph back into her pocket and straightened her spine. That night she did not sleep. She lay in the narrow staff bed listening to the enormous silence of the penthouse and thinking about the way he had looked at her, as if he already knew. By morning the fear had hardened back into purpose. She had a role to play. She would play it perfectly. The house ran on invisible hands, and Simisola learned to be the most invisible of them all. She learned which floors he walked and which he never touched. She learned that the study at the end of the East Hall was always locked, always, and that Hannah, the head of staff, went pale whenever anyone so much as looked at its door. She learned that Sora Min, the sharp woman in black who never smiled, appeared without sound and left the same way, and that when Sora Min was in the house, the whole staff moved like people who knew they were being counted. Do your work and keep your eyes on the floor, Hannah told her on the 4th morning, pressing a stack of pressed shirts into her arms. There was no cruelty in it. There was something closer to fear. The girls who forget that do not last here. Simisola's throat tightened. What happens to the ones who don't last? Hannah's hands went still on the linen. For a moment something crossed her face, grief maybe, or guilt, and then the shutter came down again and she turned back to the counter. They leave, Hannah said. One way or another. Now go. He wants his study cleaned while he showers, and he does not like to be kept waiting. The study. The locked study. Simisola's heart kicked hard against her ribs. For 3 weeks that door had been sealed to her. Now it stood open by the width of a hand, and the sound of running water carried faintly from somewhere far off, and Simisola understood that this was the first real chance she had been given. Her mouth went dry. Every instinct her sister's silence had carved into her screamed the same word. Go. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The study smelled of old paper and cold cologne. She moved fast and quiet, dusting for show, her eyes tearing across every surface. A ledger she could not read. A row of framed photographs, all of them of the same severe older man she did not recognize. And then, on the desk, beneath a paperweight of black stone, the corner of a file with a name typed across the tab. Her own borrowed surname. The false one. The one she had invented. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. He had a file on her. He had known, maybe from the first day, exactly who had walked into his house. She reached for it. Her fingers had barely brushed the stone when the water somewhere in the house shut off. Silence rushed in, huge and sudden. Simisola snatched her hand back, backed out of the room, pulled the door to the exact width she had found it, and was 3 steps down the hall with a duster in her hand and her heart in her mouth when Jean Tejo's door opened behind her. Simisola. She turned. Her face was a mask of pleasant nothing. Inside, she was screaming. He looked at her for a long, long moment. His gaze flicked, once, to the study door behind her, then back to her face. Did you finish in there? He asked softly. Yes, sir. Her voice did not shake. She was proud of that. Good. Something moved behind his dark eyes, something she could not name, amusement or warning or both. You're thorough. I like that in the people who work for me. It tells me exactly how much I need to watch them. He let the sentence hang there between them, heavy and dangerous, and then he turned and walked back into his room, and Simisola stood in the hall shaking, understanding that she was playing a game against a man who had already counted every card in her hand. She made it to the linen closet before her composure cracked. She pressed her hand to her mouth and let herself shake, once, hard, and then she forced it down. He knew she was hiding something. He did not know it was about Nadia. There was still a difference. There was still a chance. And if your chest is tight right now, if you already know this man is going to unravel her in the most beautiful and terrible way, then you understand exactly why this channel exists. Afro-Korean Collections lives for stories like this one, the kind that grab you by the throat and refuse to let go. Subscribing is how you tell us these stories are landing, that the long nights building them are worth it, and it is the only thing that lets us keep bringing you more. So if Simisola already has you, tap subscribe and stay in it with us. Because what he does next, she never sees coming. Days folded into each other. She served him dinner every night at the far end of that enormous table, one place set in a pool of gold light while the rest of the room drowned in shadow. He barely ate. He watched the dark window more than the food. And Simisola, clearing his untouched plates, began to see something she had not expected to find in the man who might have destroyed her sister. He was alone. Completely, bone-deeply alone. Sit, he said one night, without turning his head. She froze with his plate half lifted. Sir. You've been on your feet since before dawn. I can hear it in the way you walk. He nodded at the chair to his left, the first time in 3 weeks he had looked directly at her outside of an order. Sit. Eat something. The staff think I don't notice that you give your own meals to the younger girls. I notice everything, Simisola. It's the only reason I'm still alive. She should have said no. Every rule she had built for herself said keep the distance, keep the wall, he is a means to an end and nothing more. But her feet ached and her heart was tired, and she was so far from anyone who knew her real name, and when a dangerous man offers a lonely woman a chair, the loneliest part of her answers before the careful part can stop it. She sat. She ate. And for one strange hour, in a house built on fear, two people who were both pretending to be something they were not simply shared a meal in the dark. It was the most dangerous thing she had done yet. Neither of them saw the woman in the doorway. Sora Min stood in the dark at the edge of the room, arms folded, and watched her boss share a table with the new maid, and her narrow eyes went cold with a suspicion that had nothing to do with jealousy and everything to do with the file locked in the study, the file with the wrong name and the woman whose face matched no one it should have matched. Sora Min did not say a word. She simply turned, and left, and began to make quiet phone calls. Far below the 40th floor, in a city slick with rain, the machinery that would tear Simasola's careful life apart had already begun to turn. She did not know it yet. But her borrowed name had touched the wrong ledger, and somewhere in the dark, a heavy-set man with iron-gray hair was being handed a photograph and a question. Who is she, really? And why is she in Jean Taeho's house? Kwon Dae-suk had wanted Jean Taeho's territory for a long time. He had been patient about it, the way men who have survived everything are patient. And now, staring at the photograph of a woman who had entered his rival's most guarded space under a name that did not exist, he saw the opening he had waited years for. A liar in the enemy's house was not a threat. A liar in the enemy's house was a gift. You did not have to break down a man's walls when someone had already smuggled a crack inside them. You only had to find her, and turn her, or destroy her in a way that took him down too. He set the photograph on the steel table and smiled without warmth. The days stretched longer. Simasola worked herself to the bone, partly because it kept suspicion off her, and partly because exhaustion was the only thing that stopped her from lying awake thinking about the man at the head of the table. She took the shifts no one wanted. She scrubbed floors past midnight. She searched, in stolen minutes, for any trace of Nadia, and found nothing but locked doors and averted eyes. She was burning the candle from both ends and the middle, and her body was beginning to keep score. It happened on the 23rd night. She was carrying a tray of glasses back to the kitchen when the edges of the room went soft and gray. The floor swung up. The tray slipped. She caught the counter just in time, her pulse crashing somewhere around 160, black spots blooming across her vision, and she thought, with the last clear corner of her mind, that of all the ways to die in this house, fainting into the good crystal would be the most embarrassing. She did not hear him come in. Strong arms caught her before she hit the floor. She came back to herself in pieces. The warmth of him. The clean cold scent of his shirt. The frightening gentleness of the hands that held her upright, one at her back, one cradling her head, a man who broke people holding her as though she were made of something that could shatter. I've got you, Jean Taeho said, and his voice was not the boss's voice at all. It was lower than that. Rougher. Almost afraid. I've got you. Stop fighting it. Just stop, for 1 second, and let someone hold you up. For one dangerous moment she let him. She let herself be held by the man she had come here to expose, and it felt like the first time in 18 months that she had not been carrying the whole crushing weight of Nadia's silence alone. Then she remembered who he was, and who she was, and she tried to pull away. I'm fine, she whispered. Sir. Please. I can stand. No, he said simply. You can't. And you're not going to. And then Jean Taeho bent, and slid one arm beneath her thick full thighs and the other around her back, and lifted her clean off her feet as though she weighed nothing at all. She should have protested. She was too tired to protest. Her cheek found the warm curve of his shoulder and her eyes fell closed, and Jean Taeho carried her out of the kitchen and down the long dark hall, and every servant who saw them stepped back into the shadows and said nothing, because the sight of the boss carrying a maid in his arms like something precious was so far outside the order of things that no one knew what to do with it. He did not take her to the narrow staff bed in the servants' wing. He carried her past the servants' wing entirely. He carried her up, to the quiet floor that was his alone, to the austere master bedroom with its enormous low bed and its wall of glass full of cold city stars. And there, in the room where no member of staff had ever been permitted to set foot, Jean Taeho gently laid his tired maid down on his own bed. He set her down on the charcoal linens with a care that did not match a single thing she knew about him. He drew the blanket up over her. He stood over her for a moment, this dangerous man, watching her breathe, and something in his hard face came undone that no one alive had ever been allowed to see. He turned to go. And that was when her hand caught his. Her eyes opened. Barely. Just enough to find his face in the low gold light. And her fingers, moving on some instinct deeper than fear or strategy or grief, closed around his and held on. "Stay," she whispered. "Just until I fall asleep. Please. I'm so tired of being alone in this house." Jean Taeho went very still. He should have pulled his hand free. He should have called Hannah to sit with her and walked out and never spoken of it again. That was what the boss would do. That was what the man who had survived this long by feeling nothing would do. Instead, Jean Taeho sat down slowly on the edge of his own bed, and he let the tired woman hold his hand, and he stayed. He was still there when the gray dawn touched the glass. He was still there when her eyes opened fully, and found her fingers laced through his, and neither of them let go. "You stayed," she said. "I stayed," he answered. In the pale gold morning something had changed between them that neither could take back. He told her, in the low flat voice of a man unused to telling anyone anything, that he had not slept a full night in 3 years. She told him, in a voice that surprised her with its honesty, that she had not felt safe in 18 months. She almost told him why. The name Nadia rose in her throat and she swallowed it down at the last second, because the tenderness in his eyes could still turn to ice if he learned she had come into his house to dig up his secrets. And if you are still here with them, still holding your breath in this fragile hush, do one small thing for me right now. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you are watching from and what the time is where you are, because I want to know who is awake inside this story tonight. And if you are watching on your television, tap that like button so I know you are in the room with us. Then stay close, because the peace in this room is about to break. But peace in that house was only ever the space between two blows. Hannah caught her in the corridor before breakfast, her fingers digging into Simasola's arm, her voice a frantic whisper. "Sora Min has been asking about you. Where you came from. Who signed your reference. She pulled your file from the study last night." Hannah's eyes were bright with fear. "Child, whatever you're really doing here, you need to finish it or run. Because when Sora Min asks questions, people vanish. I have watched it happen. I watched it happen to the last girl who got too close to him." Simasola's blood turned to ice. "The last girl," she breathed. "What was her name?" Hannah's mouth opened. And then, down the corridor, a door opened, and Sora Min was there. "Hannah," Sora Min said pleasantly. "You're needed in the kitchen." Her cold eyes never left Simasola. "The new girl and I are going to have a conversation." Hannah hesitated one terrible second, then obeyed, because that was how survival worked in this house. And Simasola was left alone in the narrow corridor with the woman who made people disappear. Sora Min walked toward her without hurry, the way a person walks when they already know the door behind you is locked. "I know your reference is forged," Sora Min said softly. "I know the woman who signed it does not exist. I have spent 11 years keeping Jean Taeho alive, and in 11 years I have never once been wrong about a person, and I was not wrong about you the moment you walked in." She tilted her head. "So here is what I cannot understand. A spy would have run by now. A thief would have taken something. But you keep searching, night after night, for something you have not found. You are not looking for money. You are looking for a person." Her eyes narrowed. "Who?" Simasola said nothing. Her heart was going like a war drum. "Suit yourself." Sora Min stepped back. "I have already sent your face to someone who will find out for me. And when I know who you are, so will he." The clock had started. Simasola understood that now. Whatever she had come here to find, she had to find it before Sora Min's phone rang with her real name on the other end. And there was only one place in this house she had not yet been able to reach. The locked study. The file with Nadia's answer had to be in the locked study. She had one night, maybe two, before everything collapsed. She would not waste it. Jean Taeho, meanwhile, was fighting a war of his own. Sora Min had told him everything. The forged reference. The false name. The nightly searching. And he had listened in silence and felt something he had not felt in years, something that terrified him more than any rival ever had. He did not want it to be true. He wanted the tired woman who had held his hand through the night to be exactly what she seemed. And he hated himself for wanting it, because wanting things was how men like him got killed. Watch her, he told Sora Min, but do not touch her. Not until I say. Sora Min had looked at him for a long moment then, the closest thing he had to a friend in the world, and said the thing neither of them wanted to say. You already care about her. That is exactly why I cannot let you be the one to decide this. Caring is the crack, Taeho. Kwon Dae-suk has spent 20 years looking for your crack. And you just carried her to your bed in front of the entire staff. He had no answer for that. He stood on the terrace long into the night, and for the first time in his life the loneliness he had chosen felt less like armor and more like a cell. She waited until the house was dead silent. Then, in the dark hours before dawn, Simisola crept to the east hall in her nightclothes with a key she had stolen from Hannah's ring 3 days earlier and had not yet dared to use. Her hand shook as she fitted to the lock. It turned. The study door swung open into blackness. This was it. Whatever was in here, it would tell her what had happened to her sister. She worked fast, phone-like trembling across drawer after drawer, files sliding through her hands. Names she did not know. Numbers she could not decode. And then, in the bottom drawer of the steel cabinet, a slim folder with a single word handwritten across it in ink. Okero. Her sister's name. Her real name. Simisola's breath left her body in a rush. Her hands would barely obey her. She opened the folder. Inside were photographs of Nadia, surveillance photographs, her sister entering and leaving buildings, and pages of typed notes, and one document stamped in red that she had to read 3 times before the words would hold still. It was not what she had come here believing. It was so much worse, and so much stranger, and it changed everything she thought she knew about the man who had held her hand until dawn. And then the lights came on. Jean Taeho stood in the doorway of his own locked study, watching the woman he had begun to fall for kneeling on the floor with his most guarded secret open in her hands. For a long moment neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. Nadia Okero, he said at last, very quietly, reading the name off the folder she held. His eyes rose to her face, and in them she saw the exact instant the pieces locked into place. She was your sister. It was not a question. Simisola's whole careful world went silent and still. Where is she? Simisola's voice cracked down the middle. 18 months. 18 months of nothing. I lied my way into your house, I scrubbed your floors, I let you carry me to your bed, all so I could stand here and ask you one question. Where is my sister? What did you do to her? Jean Taeho did not flinch. He looked at her with something that was almost unbearable, something that looked, impossibly, like grief that matched her own. I didn't do anything to her, he said. I've been hiding her. For 18 months, I have been the only reason she is still alive. The room tilted. Everything she had built her rage on for 18 months, every certainty that this man was the villain of her sister's story, cracked and fell away beneath her. Nadia found something she was never meant to find, Jean Taeho said, stepping into the room. Kwon Dae-suk put a price on her the moment she saw it. I moved her somewhere no one could reach her and I let the world believe she had vanished, because a dead woman is safe and a hidden one is not. If I had told a single soul she was alive, she would already be in the ground. So would anyone who came looking for her. His eyes held hers. Anyone. Do you understand what you have done by coming here under a false name? You have painted a target on both of you. Before Simisola could answer, Sora Min appeared in the doorway, and one look at her face told them both that the worst had already come. It's done, Sora Min said flatly. The contact I sent her face to. He didn't work for me. Her cold eyes moved to Simisola. He works for Kwon Dae-suk. I walked us straight into it. Kwon knows there's a woman in this house connected to Nadia Okero. And if he connects her to you, he'll know Nadia is still alive. The blood drained from Jean Taeho's face. 18 months of protection, undone in a single night. Then we move her tonight, Jean Taeho said, already turning, already the boss again, the tenderness locked back behind the iron. Right now, before Kwon can act. Sora, get the car. Simisola. He stopped. He looked at the woman who had appended everything, and for one heartbeat the man who had held her hand looked back out through the boss's eyes. You want to see your sister? Then you come with us. And you do exactly as I say, or we all die tonight. Every one of us. Simisola clutched Nadia's folder to her chest and nodded. Her sister was alive. Alive. After everything, after all of it, Nadia was alive. She had no idea it was already too late. They took the private elevator down to the garage in a silence so tight it hummed. Simisola's mind was a storm. The man beside her was not the man she had built her hatred around. He had lied to the whole world to keep her sister breathing. He had carried her to his bed not as a predator but as the loneliest man she had ever met, reaching, just once, for something warm. And she had walked into his life like a lit match into a room full of smoke. He opened the car door for her, and in that small ordinary courtesy, in the middle of the most dangerous night of both their lives, she saw exactly who he was underneath all the ice. She stopped, one hand on the cold door, and looked up at him. Thank you, she said. For keeping her alive. I came here to destroy you. And you were saving her the whole time. Something in his hard face broke, just slightly, just for her. Get in the car, Simisola, he said roughly. We can hate each other and forgive each other later. Right now we have to reach her before he does. She never got in the car. Headlights exploded across the garage, 3 sets, 4 black vehicles pouring down the ramp and fanning out to seal every exit. Doors slammed. Figures moved in the glare. And a voice rolled across the concrete, unhurried, almost warm, the voice of a man who had waited 20 years for this exact moment and intended to enjoy every second of it. Jean Taeho, Kwon Dae-suk called out. You've been hiding something from me. 2 somethings, it turns out. Kwon Dae-suk walked into the light like a man arriving at a party he was throwing. His cold eyes found Simisola, and the folder clutched against her chest, and his smile widened by a fraction. The Okero girl's sister, he said, almost delighted. Carrying a folder out of your study in the middle of the night. Which means the file exists. Which means the other sister is alive after all. He clicked his tongue. You should never have let yourself care about anything, Taeho. I taught you that myself, a long time ago. And here you are, about to lose everything, because you carried a maid to bed. Jean Taeho moved without a word. He stepped in front of Simisola, putting his own body between her and the guns in the dark, and the boss she had feared for 3 weeks became something else entirely, a wall, a shield, a man who had finally found something worth dying in front of. You want the folder, he said, his voice flat and terrible. You want the location. Fine. Take me. Let her walk out of here, and I'll give you everything you've wanted for 20 years. Taeho, no, Simisola breathed behind him. Kwon Dae-suk laughed softly. You misunderstand me. I don't want to trade. I want to watch you lose. There's a difference. In the dark, hidden between their bodies where Kwon Dae-suk could not see, Simisola's hand found Jean Taeho's and gripped it hard. The same hand she had held through the night. The same hand that had carried her to safety when she was too proud to ask. He held on. Whatever came next, they would meet it exactly like this. Together. And then, from the shadows at the far ramp, a new set of headlights bloomed, and a car came down fast, and everyone turned, and the person who stepped out of it was the one face in the entire world that could tip this night in either direction. The woman stepped into the crossing beams, and the harsh light caught the long slim twists gathered back from a face that Simisola had seen every single night for 18 months, in the photograph she carried against her heart. Simisola's knees nearly buckled. The folder slipped from her fingers and scattered across the concrete. Because it was not possible. Nadia was hidden. Nadia was safe, somewhere Kwon Dae-suk could never reach. That was the entire point. That was the thing Jean Taeho had bled 18 months to protect. And yet there she was, walking into the most dangerous room in the city on her own 2 feet. Nadia, Simisola whispered, the name torn out of her like something breaking. But her sister was not looking at her. Nadia Okero was looking at Kwon Dae-suk, and there was no fear in her face at all. There was something far more frightening than fear. There was recognition. Familiarity. The look of a person walking up to someone they have known for a very long time. "Hello, uncle," Nadia said. And Kwon Dae-suk smiled and opened his arms. The word landed like a blade between Simisola's ribs. Uncle. Nadia had called Kwon Dae-suk uncle. The man who had hunted her, the man who had forced Jin Tae-ho to hide her for 18 months, the villain at the center of everything. Her sister knew him. Her sister had walked in to greet him. 18 months of grief. 18 months of a false name and stolen references and scrubbing floors and searching in the dark. 18 months believing she was rescuing a victim. And her sister was not a victim at all. Jin Tae-ho understood it a half-second before she did, and she watched the understanding hit him, watched the man who had protected Nadia Okero with everything he had realized that the woman he had been protecting had been feeding Kwon Dae-suk his secrets from the inside the entire time. He had not been hiding a victim. He had been sheltering the knife. His head turned slowly toward Simisola, and the question in his eyes was one she could not bear, because it was the same question that was tearing her own chest apart. Did you know? Were you part of this? Were you ever real? And then, finally, Nadia turned and looked at her little sister standing frozen in the headlights, and for the first time something cracked in her resolved face. "Simi," Nadia said, and her voice was thick. "You were never supposed to come looking. I did all of this so you would never have to be here. So you would be safe." Her eyes flicked to Kwon Dae-suk, then back, desperate now. "Whatever they told you about me, whatever you think you just learned, you have to trust me for 10 more seconds. Because in 10 seconds this whole garage is going to come apart, and only one of us knows which way to run." Simisola looked at her sister's hand sliding into her coat. She looked at Kwon Dae-suk's satisfied smile. She looked at Jin Tae-ho standing between her and death with a question in his eyes she still had not answered. 3 people she loved or feared or both. 3 stories she had thought she understood. And in the space of one held breath, every single one of them had turned out to be someone else. Her heart was slamming somewhere past 180. The whole garage held its breath with her. Nobody moved. The whole night balanced on the edge of a single second, 4 people in a ring of headlights, every one of them holding a secret that could burn the others to the ground. "Simi," Nadia said again, softer now, and held out her free hand across the space between them. "Take my hand. Right now. And do not let go, no matter what you see." Simisola looked at her sister's outstretched hand. She looked back at Jin Tae-ho, at the man who had carried her to bed and stood between her and the guns, at the hand of his she was still gripping in the dark. 2 hands. 2 people asking her to trust them with her life. And she could only hold on to one. Her whole life had narrowed to this. The sister she had crossed a city and buried herself in a stranger's house to save, who had just called the enemy uncle. The dangerous man who had lied to the world to protect that same sister, who had held her through the dark and shielded her with his body. One of them was telling her the truth. One of them was going to get her killed. And she had 1 second to choose which hand to hold. Simisola drew a breath that shook all the way down. She tightened her grip on Jin Tae-ho's hand. She chose the man who had carried her to bed. She chose the hand she had woken up still holding. And in that exact instant, Nadia's face went white, and her sister screamed one word across the garage, a word that changed the meaning of everything, a word Simisola would replay for the rest of her life. Wrong hand. Wrong hand. The words did not make sense. They could not make sense. Simisola turned to look up at the man whose hand she had just chosen, the man she had trusted with her life, and found him already looking down at her. But the tenderness was gone from Jin Tae-ho's face. Something cold and unfamiliar had slid into place behind his dark eyes, something she had never once seen there in 3 weeks of nights, and his grip on her hand tightened until it hurt, until she could not have pulled free if she tried. "You should have listened to your sister," he said quietly. The floor did not open and swallow her, though she begged it to. It only held her there, hand locked in his, as every certainty of the last 3 weeks turned inside out. Kwon Dae-suk had not come to destroy Jin Tae-ho. And Nadia had not walked in to greet an uncle who was her enemy. Simisola had spent the entire night reading the wrong story, and the man she had just chosen, the man she had woken up still holding, the man she had let herself begin to love, was not standing between her and the danger at all. He was the danger. He always had been. And she had just taken his hand of her own free will. Nadia was still screaming her name. Kwon Dae-suk was still smiling. And Jin Tae-ho's cold fingers were still wrapped around the hand she had given him freely, the hand that had reached for his in the dark and refused to let go. And that is exactly where we have to stop. Because if your heart is pounding, if you cannot believe she chose wrong, if you need to know what Nadia was really trying to save her from and who Jin Tae-ho truly is, then you cannot leave her here like this. Comment the words part 2 right now, as loud as you can, and tell me you are ready, because the moment enough of you demand it, I am releasing the next part. Simisola made her choice. Now you have to make yours. Do not let this be where her story ends.